Hiya. Welcome to today's edition of Caddy's Corner. You are hearing a car alarm go off because two very loud motorcycles just went flying by. Woo! Crazy. So, welcome to Bed-Stuy on a Monday afternoon. Hi, how are you? I have a very busy agenda today on my beautiful Monday day off with this gorgeous, like almost 60-degree weather. I am recording this right as our worm moon, the first super moon of the year, is happening almost simultaneously at 1:49 in the afternoon. That's when it's at its peak crest. And do you know why it's called a worm moon? I looked it up. It's because this is when, in the spring, this moon is when the earthworms come up and out of the ground, so that's why it got called the worm moon. It has been an interesting weekend, and I am going to babble today about decision making. So yesterday, hoping the wind's not too bad on this, I'm trying to figure out how to hold this to get the least amount of, there you go, see if that works. So last night a girl came in the bar, she's new in the neighborhood, and we got chit-chatting about some mystical experiences we've had, the awakening to who we really are, the work we're doing to get there, whatever. And I've told this story a handful of times. I'm not going to get into all the details right now, but I know that I've mentioned that I was anemic and that I had been sick. And truth of the matter is, I don't know if you've heard it before or whatever. I'll just go ahead and tell it here very briefly. I had a condition called endomyosis that made me bleed out as if I had a stab wound in my body. So I wasn't losing period blood, I was losing human blood, and didn't know I was misdiagnosed with a fibroid, blah, blah, blah. Well, I almost died, and it was no small matter. It was not a, like, sort of, oh, I almost died, like I'm sort of saying it. That's how we talking across the corners here in Bed-Stuy. I'm not trying to make light of it because it has been a real turning point in my life. It was a real crux of a lot of the change that's happening. But one thing that it's really opened my eyes to that I'm still struggling with, wrestling with, and trying to reconcile to make sense of is we're always doing the best we can in any given moment with the information we have. It's like when you look back on something that happened to you when you were 15, you're like, why did I handle it that way? And then you're like, look at a 15-year-old. Look at a 15-year-old and give them the same problem right then, whatever it was, and say, all right, you solve it like I would now when I'm 40 or 50 or 25 even, or 17. I mean, it really doesn't matter. And of course, you're going to go, oh, you know, and that's a little bit of oxygen, but that kind of reconciliation can be really minute in our lives, and trying to like piece apart each little bit of what we've been through and why we did what we did and how we got where we got and whatever. For me, I'm finding that there was a mix of two things emotionally. I was pinned down in my life. I was tethered down to depression, anxiety post 9/11, the darkest depression forms that there are, a lot of manic depressive behavior, because I would also then action to try to pull myself out of it with no real recovery in it, just like manic, do as much as I can, solve as much as I can until I crashed again. It's a pattern, it's a loop, hence the manic behavior, or manic depressive. So in my spirit and my mental health and in those zones, I was tethered down to a lot of darkness, a lot of that's the best way to put it, unequal relationships, and that took a particular toll on me, unbeknownst to me, simultaneously, probably for about 5 years, although my surgeon thought it might have been lifelong. I didn't have enough blood in my body for my brain, physically my brain, to keep operating at its potential even in that moment. So quite honestly, like an addict would be in the years of brownout getting worse to blackout, as I got closer to my near-death experience, where I only had a quarter of the blood in my body I was supposed to have, over years, my brain had learned to just, let's shut down the systems we don't really need. And critical thinking and decision-making processes were a big part of that. So in every single circumstance of every relationship, of every job decision I made, of every route I took to go anywhere, literally the routes I took to go to the grocery store were made by a brain that was operating at its lowest potential, literally its lowest potential. And so I not only have the trick now of trying to look in hindsight from my emotional place, psychologically, what could I have done better? What was really the problem that I a lot of times was putting on, saying it was another kind of problem. So I have to also wrestle with the fact that I physically did not have the capability to make good or great decisions. I just didn't. I didn't have enough blood in my body. And I know it's true because the doctor told me, but after the surgery, so it was April 2 years ago almost, and coming up on the 2-year anniversary. So April, May, June, July. So 3 months later, almost to the week, in 1 week, it was such an extreme change. There was no way for me not to notice it. In 1 week, 3 months after the surgery, now my body had all the blood it needed, and my brain was like, oh, okay, we're safe. We're not going to be like missing all of our blood again. It clicked on. And the first thing that happened that I noticed, anyway, in this recovery was my vocabulary changed. I had a lot of difficulty in communicating bigger theories, bigger thoughts, bigger words. It's kind of like, I guess reading a report that you did when you were in the 8th grade versus when you did when you were 21 in college. Like I was 47, 48, 49 years old, but I was speaking as if I was a 15-year-old. And honestly thinking like that too. This street is so loud today. I guess it always is, but I just notice it when I'm recording. So I had a medical, legitimate change in my perspective because of all of this. I am fighting to get better at decision making and boundaries and all these things I talk about all the time from where I am now. But I have to accept that the places I was before weren't healthy. They weren't mentally healthy. They weren't physically healthy. So how can I make all of that better? But I think what I'm just trying to impart today, that's my story and what I went through. And it was dramatic. It was very dramatic. It was arriving in an ER. I walked myself in and the lady took my blood and was like, oh my God, you have a 3.8 CBC. And I was like, I knew what the number meant. And I was like, anyway, the bus is coming. Decision making matters. Where you're at in your mind matters. Never forget that you can be better and smarter and stronger about how you're doing it. Thanks for joining me in Caddyland. Gotta go.